today is sort of looking at how we use shaping and capturing, but just as a starting point, I'm going to sit down, but as a starting point, I just kind of wanted to mention the techniques that are available for training a new behavior from start to finish, and just briefly touch on what each of those are and kind of what they mean. So first is modeling. And this is when you actually take the animal and physically put it in the, say, position or location that you would want it to be in. And really the primary benefit of this, you can imagine like opening up an animal's wing or something like that. The primary benefit to this is that the animal hopefully becomes comfortable, not in a state of learned helplessness, and allows you to manipulate their body. But if you think about it, they're not really learning a whole lot. And in some cases, some animals may be quite uncomfortable with you grabbing and physically manipulating them. And if you were to try to do it with certain animals, it might be quite dangerous for you. So again, the disadvantages include things like safety. You're handling and manipulating an animal. It may trigger some sort of resistance. The minute you pull on an animal, they want to pull back. They may not become relaxed. They could slip into that state of learned helplessness where they just give up and sort of let you manipulate them. And clearly that's terrible for welfare, so we wouldn't want to do something like that. And it can be difficult to transition from one person to another. And a primary part of what we're trying to develop with our training programs here is that it's easily transferable from one person to another. So we're training people in a consistent way, using consistent cues across similar species like primates or bears or something like that. So we really want it to be transferable. And then the second technique is something that I just call distraction. And sort of what I mean by this is you've got the sea lion in the box, you're stuffing fish in. Such a conditioned response. You're stuffing fish in the box and you shut the door on the animal while they're not paying attention to what you're doing. So you're taking the animal's attention away from perhaps what you want to do and accomplishing a goal. This is a bear getting an injection in the shoulder, you're getting food up here while I slip the needle in and you're not really paying attention to it. And I have seen this work in some cases, but the advantages of this are you may get to your end goal quite quickly because you're not necessarily going through desensitization steps or shaping steps or something like that. So you may actually achieve your goal pretty quickly, and the animal sort of learns to ignore your activity. But the disadvantages, I believe, in most cases outweigh the advantages. And the disadvantages include things like, you're distracting the animal, you may startle them, and then you may erode the trust that you've been working so hard to build up because you didn't realize you were going to startle them as much as you did. And then they just go away and don't want to train with you anymore. There's no history associated with this type of learning. You're not teaching them small steps that are building on each other, so you're not really creating that strong foundation of learning. Okay, and then, and I'm just going to kind of get through these quickly so we can get to shaping and capturing. So if anybody has any questions, just raise your hand and interrupt me. But I just wanted to introduce these. Okay, so the other bit that I want you to think about is social learning, which of course involves animals learning from each other. And this is a real situation of social learning. This elephant was not trained to present her foot. She was absolutely mimicking her mother. So flat out social learning. And this has certainly been documented in a number of different species. Marine mammals will learn to do the whole show series by following a mom around or something like that. So this can be a good way to help animals overcome maybe some anxiety or fear of learning or fear of being in close proximity to a trainer. You can help them deal with that by exposing them to another animal doing some training. And you may also see just flat out mimicry, where one animal is being trained to do another behavior and another one mimics, which is what's happening here. There was something else I wanted to say about social learning. Oh, just we were documenting the effects of social learning in a chimpanzee study, looking at urine collection. And for those of you that have trained this behavior, I don't know if you've experienced the same things I have, but that is that there could be quite a range of how long it takes an animal to learn and how easily that transfers to different locations and different scenarios in which you might want to collect the urine. So training this group of 35 older female chimpanzees to urinate on command was an interesting task and gave us this opportunity not only to compare how they learn, you know, some of them, despite having liters of dilute juice and fluid, would still not go for 2 hours. I mean, they must have had bladders this size of this room. But what we found was if we exposed them to animals that were already trained for the behavior, they learned significantly quicker, just simply by watching. If we exposed them to video where they saw the one who was peeing get reinforced, they learned significantly quicker. If they watched the video but did not see the other chimp get reinforced, they did not, their learning was not as effective. So that was kind of interesting. But
Just real quick, we actually saw that with our vervets, because Miskini were trying to do peat
I
collection.
heard vet, not vervet.
Vervet, yes. And I am kind of below Miskini, very food motivated. Literally after watching that, and finally at one point Lily just pushed Miskini out of the way and sat and peed on the tray and was like,
Whoa.
and it was like taking to reinforce, but we don't want her to pee on that tray. So, but she quickly caught on to that.
Cool. So I love examples like that. That's just so, I love the way animals learn. So cool. I just wanted to mention bribe. I mean, we've spent quite a few of these sessions discussing bribery and how we use it and how we try to work out from it. But again, just, you know, when you're bribing to train a new behavior, you're going to present a food item or something that the animal wants in order to encourage them to make the movement or give you the desired behavior. And when you use a bribe, remember you want to recognize what you're doing. Hello, I'm Margaret, I use bribes. That's not a problem, but you do want to make a plan to eliminate or fade out that bribe and replace it with a proper cue and reinforcement. So just kind of a little review of that. Any questions on that? If you remember, I think I've shown you these videos training the bear to do an open mouth. She's holding a bit of food between her fingers. So that's using the bribe. He's opening his mouth to get the food. But you can see how the cue, opened, easily comes from that behavior. So then beginning to replace it with the cue and no bribe present. Okay, so just a quick little example there. All right, now we'll spend the rest of the time talking about capturing and shaping. And I can't remember, have we spent much time talking about capturing and shaping?
We've definitely talked about shaping
Okay.
rather than capturing is what I feel like.
Talked about it.
Okay, but because I was trying to look through my old presentations and see exactly what details we've had, looked at, and I'm not sure. So hopefully this isn't too redundant, but I tried to work in some different ideas and thoughts about capturing. And so now as we kind of go forward with the rest of this, it would be great, as you all always do, to provide your thoughts and input on these things and kind of think about how you're using the different techniques and if any adjustments would help you achieve goals faster. So capturing is essentially when you see a behavior occur, you reinforce it. And the idea is it's best to assign a cue pretty much from the beginning, and then you can start asking the animal to do the behavior. So transferring from, I see it happen, I bridge and reinforce, to being able to actually provide the stimulus, the cue, get the behavior, and then reinforce it. Sometimes capturing can happen quite quickly, but, well, I'll talk about that in just a second. And of course, there are some behaviors that can only be trained through capturing, such as urine collection or vocalization. You can do things like giving lots and lots of drinks to the chimpanzees in the hopes that they'll pee in a reasonable amount of time, but you can't really squeeze them and make it happen. So you have to wait for that first precious drop to fall so that you can reinforce it. And of course, vocalization the same way. And I believe that I've shown you this example before. This was training a giant anteater to urinate on command. And what the keeper noticed is that when he would do the misting in the morning, the mist bath, which the anteater really liked, that she would often urinate. So he was able to then use that as a way to capture the behavior, and then the stick that he's got, that's what he collected. He just took the bottle and cut the bottom of the bottle off, so that's what he would collect it in. That became the cue for pee for me. And here's just an example of a urine sample on a chimpanzee. So she's been trained through capturing to urinate on command, and then she's been desensitized to that PVC wand going underneath her, and that's used to catch the clean sample. But I think it is important that we consider some of the drawbacks of capturing. And these are the things that I've come up with, and I would certainly be interested, because I'm sure this is not an exhaustive list, I'd be interested to hear your experiences with capturing. But in general, things like when there's regression, you don't have small steps to go back and retrace. You've got no kindergarten. You've gone from 0 to 100 when you capture, unless you refine the behavior a little bit. But so you just have to sort of wait for it to happen again before you can reinforce it. And this can yield frustration not only for the trainer, but also for the animal if they're sitting in front of you like, what do you want me to do? I don't know what you want me to do, and you're not giving me anything for it, and I'm getting frustrated and mad. So I think you do have to be careful about that you're not creating any frustration. The other thing that I've seen with capturing is the behavior can become intimately tied to like a location or some set of circumstances that exist when that behavior was presented by the animal. And so if you, for some reason, can't replicate that set of circumstances, then it's obviously difficult to get the behavior. And with having it tied to a location, like if you've trained, this happens all the time with bigger animals that maybe we're teaching, like an elephant, teaching it to lean in. So we present its side, so we stick its head in a corner so that it really can't go forward, so the movement then becomes the hip coming in sideways. And then when you go to do the behavior in another location that maybe doesn't have that corner, it can be difficult for the animal to transition from being in the corner where that's kind of all I can do to being outside in a full open space and replicating that behavior. So that's what I mean by tied to a location. Or there may be some other, like if you're teaching an animal to lie down, maybe it's easy to get them to do it in one particular location, and then you try to generalize it somewhere else, and it becomes very difficult. So this can definitely be a drawback that I've seen and experienced with capturing.
What about accidentally capturing aggression when trying to capture certain behaviors associated with that? My specific example is some of the macaws were previously trained for awaiting partial open, but it was in association with a bit of a threat. So some of them do still do the open mouth when they do that behavior, so I have stopped asking that completely of those birds because I have that fear of encouraging the entire aggressive routine. I have captured wings open, however, when attempting to flap or fly at something, and that I haven't seen any problems with.
Yeah, I think that's, it may be a little bit of both. I mean, I think it's something that you're going to look at for each individual, and maybe they make the initial move out of a bit of a threat and aggression, but when you then ask for it, if you've captured it, are they still feeling like they need to be aggressive, and then I think you would be reinforcing aggression, which you might not want to do. But if they're emulating the behavior without the emotional state that originally caused it, then it's probably less of a problem, and you can then train the mouth closed and still get the open. So I think you really have to look at the situation and kind of see, is aggression continuing to happen? Is it aggression directed towards me, the trainer? If it is, I can probably deal with that, and it's probably gonna go away over time. If it's the bird's doing a behavior, but it's a threat to another bird, then that might be a different type of problem or consideration for how you train it.
I think I also just continued it, they would do the wing shrug, where they partially lift the wings, but not fully extend.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that either, because those are very different.
Yeah. So, and then that's a case of you want to change how the behavior looks. And perhaps the emotional state of the bird ties into that a little bit. Oh, this is another, I experienced this, my next slide is an orangutan, because I experienced this exact point with an orangutan, an animal that we think of as being super smart and able to leap mental tall buildings in a single bound or something like that. I don't know. That was a really bad analogy. But when you're training body parts, and say if you're training a primate and they've got their foot up against the mesh, you touch it and say, good foot. You're capturing that foot behavior. So then you think, oh, well, they get this foot. I can just ask for this foot and they'll be able to translate. This was exactly the problem with this orangutan is he, I think it's a he. Oops. Where'd he go? There he is. Yes, it's a he. He could not make the leap from presenting his left arm, or whichever it was, to presenting his right arm. And the keeper was feeling extremely frustrated. She's like, he learned the left one, or whichever one it was. He learned the first arm so fast. Why won't he do the other one when I'm saying arm, 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 arm? And the reason is he didn't have any history of learning to make that movement. He was just leaning against the cage front and she said arm, and so then he would understand to bring that one arm in. But he didn't have this concept of moving in with his body part. So I think this is also a drawback of capturing. And with a lot of animals, it's really easy to capture their body parts when they're presenting them right up against the cage front, or how you might want those body parts presented. So you just want to think about that it doesn't necessarily translate from right to left or leg to arm or whatever it might be.
I have an example with Moki Zebra that, she's so desensed to like anything going on around her that we can file her hoof and touch down the leg and everything in place. And when I show the behaviors, she also has a foot target that she's wearing. And people will often ask, why do you do both? And my answer is usually just simply that they're mentally different. That for her to stand in place and let me touch the foot is just a big part of, is just part of her bigger picture of tolerating things going on, whereas the mental activity of give me the foot, controlling the movement of the body part is different, and that they're both helpful, but that they are trained separately.
Yeah.
That touching the foot does not give her a concept of move the foot.
Exactly.
And that you have to train them separately, and that they're both useful, but different.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit in shaping as well. But I think that's an excellent point, and yeah, I'll save the other point for later. And so I think I already sort of said this, but with capturing, there's no learning to learn. There's no, steps that are building on each other. So generalization is difficult, and having that really strong foundation is not there. Anything else on capturing? Does anybody have any?
I have a question about, if you're capturing it, say, I know with the peeing, sometimes we'll see you pee on exhibit, we'll be like, good pee. How do you create a cue for that then, if you're just saying, good pee, then how do you develop into a cue to get them to pee on command?
That's a great question. So did everybody hear that in the back? The question was, if you're training pee on command, how do you go from the reinforcement part to converting it to a cue? So you want to have whatever is going to be your verbal and your physical cue. If it's something like urinating, it may be, like you saw with the chimpanzee, the PVC wand. I mean, at this one, well, some of you have been there, at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Bastrop, where I used to work. You would walk down the hallway with the pee wand, and I mean, it sounded like Niagara Falls. Everybody would just start peeing, because the wand became such a stimulus for, oh, let's pee, because we're gonna get good stuff for it. So that, and then you start having that cue, whatever you want the cue to be, you have that when you're capturing the behavior. So then they start to put 2 and 2 together. And then, of course, if it is something like peeing, you do, and that's one that can be difficult with regard to location. Some animals may be comfortable peeing in one particular spot, or if they're specific defecators, urinators, latrine users, whatever it might be, then they already kind of have their spot where they go. So if you do want to catch it in something that you're holding on to, then you need to have them come close to you. So it can be difficult if they have their favorite spot where they pee all the time, and you've captured it, and they understand, oh, I go here, but it's, meters away from you and you can't collect it, then that can be a problem. So that's where it can be really helpful to train it in either if you're going to train it in a specific location, make sure that it's in a location that's readily accessible to you to collect the urine, like on a bench or somewhere close that you can reach the animal, or train them to go over a pan that, again, you can easily remove, which sounds like what y'all were doing with the vets or the rodents.
That's what I was thinking when you said that it's difficult to transfer because it's so associated, but as long as you train in something like the wand or the pan, as long as it's reinforced so heavily that it is actually potent to them,
Yeah.
then hopefully you can move it from location to location.
Exactly, yeah. This gorilla that when I was consulting at another zoo, they had a gorilla who would often, she would sit on a little curb, like a little concrete curb in the exhibit and pee there. And they're like, well, she'll pee all day long for us, but it's always, clear at the back of the exhibit on the little curb. So we had to, kind of like your wing behavior, go back and completely retrain it and desensitize her to coming up, having the wand put underneath her and go through all those steps. And then the painful part of having her pee somewhere close by so that you can reinforce it. That behavior, sometimes I still have nightmares about it. Not just the gorilla, but peeing in general.
Sounds like a better backstory.
Mostly because of all the stuff with the chimpanzees. And there were monkeys involved in the study too. So great. Okay, so let's delve into shaping a little bit. And I think this will be familiar to most of you, but shaping does involve taking the behavior, breaking it down into lots and lots of small steps, and those small steps are referred to as successive approximations. So because you have all of these small steps leading towards your final behavior, you create a really solid foundation of learning for the animal. They're repeating behaviors or repeating aspects of the behavior over and over. So we all learn by hearing things, seeing things, doing things more than once. So animals certainly learn the same way, so all of that opportunity for repetition creates that strong foundation. And with shaping, we're often using similar tools like targets. So we may use the same tool, but we use it in a different way. So again, that concept of, with the target, for example, coming towards the target is made even stronger, and therefore the behaviors get easier, typically easier to shape, because the animal understands, oh, this is a similar thing that's happening, which is generalization, a similar thing happening in a slightly different context. So what you actually get are animals that are really good problem solvers, and I think this is also where we see the benefit, the psychological well-being, problem-solving, mental stimulation benefit of training, is that animals have some information, and now they're using that information to solve a problem, to achieve a goal, to get the treat, to earn the positive reinforcement, whatever it might be. So now not only are we training animals to help out with their veterinary care, to shift and make our daily husbandry routines easier, Maybe you're teaching them to carry a broom around and do a bit of cleaning, whatever it might be. I mean, you're teaching them to do all of these things that allow us to take better care of them, but think about the mental stimulation of learning to problem solve this way. I mean, I hope that's why you love training, because it's fun and you're problem solving and thinking all the time. That's, to me, one of the most exciting things about it. And then to see the animals engaged in that same process is remarkable. I mean, time and time again, I think it's remarkable. So we can give them that when we're using this type of training. And of course, with shaping, we typically are going to start with the easiest, least offensive behaviors to the animals. If they don't want you to touch a particular body part, even though that's your goal, don't start there. Start where it's easy. Let them learn the game, build on all of that good experience they're having with the training until you can get, then you can start to focus on the more difficult behaviors. So start easy, learn to learn, lots of repetition, lots of positive reinforcement, manna from heaven, and sunshine and bunnies. Any questions about that rather odd diatribe I just went off on? Okay. All right, so again, just to sort of think about targets and why we use targets and how they function. We just came from a baboon session talking a bit more about using the body target. Just as a reminder, of course, the target is associated only with positive reinforcement training. For bigger animals like an elephant or a giraffe, it functions as an extension of your arm. You know, with the zebras, you guys are doing a lot of hand targeting. You touch them and they move their shoulder or hip or whatever body part, neck, into your hand. Your hand is a body target. It's that little stick that we're using for the baboons. It's the hip target that's used for the elephant there. It's the same thing. It's simply a point of reference that says move this body part here. Okay? So, and I know I've said this before too, but target is not the end. Target is the very beginning, and all it is a tool that you're going to use to help shape behavior by directing the animal's movements. Whether it's movements of their pinky toe or movement from, you know, one point in the exhibit to another point. All it is a tool to help you elicit movement, usually, sometimes staying still. And targets can also enhance your safety. I'm not sure if I've shown you this video or not, but the elephant's done a nice lean in. She's moved into the barrier. She's not being aggressive, she just leaned in hard. And I foolishly had something between the elephant and a hard place, which was the target, so it got trapped. So if I had been hand targeting her, I would not have much of my hand, she would have smashed it. So anyway, the point being, targeting can help enhance your safety, and of course they're helpful when, good God, okay. And of course targets are helpful for teaching behavior, you can use them to cue behavior, all of those things. This is a sort of new monkey that I've been working with, and he's a rescue, he's at a sanctuary, and he's just learning targeting. And we think he has some vision problems, so he'll sort of see the target. Sometimes he'll get mad at it. He does a little self-directed behavior sometimes. He's a bit of a mess. You see he's looking away from the target, sort of, I don't see it's there. If I don't look at it, it'll go away. I feel like it's what he's saying. So with introducing the initial target to animals, you may see a response like this. You may see aggression, you may see curiosity. Oh, hey, what is it? I'll just come up and sniff it, which is, of course, lovely when that happens. This little female elephant just learning to touch the head target. Not the nicest way to touch it. Bridge and reinforce for touching it nicely. So she learned the first steps. She was smashing it. She's a rescued temple elephant, so she's not real keen on people, and she's managed quite aggressively by people in free contact. So she would come up and smash the target, and I think when she saw nothing bad was happening to her for smashing it. She was actually kind of having fun doing that. So it was almost a way to engage her in training, because she was quite aloof when we started, didn't want anything to do with us, didn't want to interact, just, I hate you people, I don't want to be around you. But then when she could get some jollies from smashing the target, it engaged her and she wanted to come up, and then we were able to start differentially reinforcing touching the target a little bit more nicely. So I guess my point is, aggression isn't always a bad thing. Obviously you don't want an animal behaving aggressive, posing a dangerous situation to you or to them, but they're telling you something by that behavior. I mean, they've got something to say. So we can listen to it and sometimes, like in this case, use it to our advantage. Really to her advantage. All right, and I believe, have I shown you this video of the bear learning to go to the target? You'll hear it, he's sucking the raisins out of the trainer's hand. Oh, it's super cute. It's super cute. So he knows how to touch a target. He's just learning to go to the target. Raisin sucker. He knows open mouth too. So you can see he's not moving a very far distance. Now he's moving a little bit further. Okay, now you'll notice the trainer's not having to ask as often. So cute. Super cute. But this is just sort of a condensed, the Reader's Digest version, I guess, of learning some of the shaping steps for the go-to the behavior, go-to the target behavior. So at first, starting with the target, inches off his nose, and he's just leaning into it. But using the go cue, different than target, and then gradually moving him a little bit further and further away, and maybe at first the trainer's walking with him saying, go to the target, and then you can just eventually get to the point of pointing to the target, and he'll go from any location in the enclosure and any direction. With the go behavior, it's not a come here. The animal is responding to your cue, go, go, or go. So you can teach different directions. So the idea is you say, Sydney, go, and you would turn and look in that direction. And then there's some B point, whatever the B point is, that the animal would go and find and get reinforced. So initially there may be reinforcement for responding to the go. So when I say go, and Sydney turns her head, I would bridge that response to the go. I'm not waiting for her to get all the way to the B point. So those are some of the small steps that you might use for this particular behavior. But it is different than a come here. And the beauty of it is when you teach directions, you really get a pretty good way to tell an animal where you want them to move, rather than come here, and they're not sure where you are, and you're jumping up and down and trying to flag them in. So it can be a really handy behavior, particularly for animals that are living in large spaces, or if you need to direct them remotely, you can't be right up next to them, and you want to send them to go back through several stalls and around the corner into some other place.
Would you start training that behavior? I know there's probably a billion different ways to do it, but would you start by having a second person at the B point reinforcing? Or, I feel like that would probably be the easiest, and then fade out that person?
Yeah, that's the easiest, but that doesn't mean you can't do it just like you saw with the bear. Yeah.
But if you're doing longer distance, but I guess you can just start right away and then reinforce yourself, so there's different ways of going about it, but it wouldn't devalue behavior to have a second person.
No, absolutely not. It
Okay.
absolutely is the easiest way
Okay.
to start it and then fade that second person out. Yeah.
I'm doing this behavior with Balthazar the giraffe, and we have worked our way up to about 15 feet.
Woo! All right.
It's pretty good.
Somebody give her a cookie.
Shall I?
your glasses back?
I am.
Did you get your glasses back?
I think so.
You think so?
I know what
They're halfway there.
I forgot them.
All right. Okay, so when we're using shaping, well, any training, we're going to use something called selective or differential reinforcement. And as some of you may recall, this is how you improve the quality of the behavior. So whatever the quality of the behavior is, whatever you're determining as higher quality, maybe for Balthazar moving 20 feet next time, that's going to be raising the quality. So you're going to reinforce him for moving 20 feet, but at the same time you're pushing the behavior in the direction you want it to go. You need to reinforce the higher quality, but then of course you have to stop reinforcing the lower quality. Because if you're reinforcing everything, how does the animal know what you actually want as your end objective? Okay, so we're all probably a bit tender-hearted, right? We go, oh, they're trying, the animal's trying really hard. Oh, Slum's looking real guilty right now.
As Virginia nods.
The animal's trying really hard, I'm just gonna go ahead and reinforce them, because they're trying so hard.
I have a good example of that. When I first took over training for Busu, or bull draft in the chute, I realized that he had me in a loop of, I can only do 1 foot. I can just do 1 foot. So I reinforced it, and it was like this, I can't give you 2. And he gave me 2. And then the next time he was like, no, I can only do 1. And I realized that he had me in the loop of, I only have this low criteria for you. And once I was clear on, you did 1, good, now I'm only reinforcing for another one, that's when he broke out of it and he started moving forward. But I kept coming back to this like, oh, but that was nice too.
Yeah.
And we didn't go anywhere. So it was really, I think it's really easy to get locked in that.
Especially if you're working with an animal that's older or really afraid, like a little vervet monkey or something. And so you're feeling like, oh, maybe they can't do it, or they've had some horrible thing happen to them. Yeah, so I mean, it's nice that we're tender hearts like that, right? But if you want to move the behavior forward, sometimes you have to get a little tough love about it, but really it's about consistency, it's about good reinforcement, selecting the part of the behavior that you want to reinforce, and yeah. Sorry.
I was gonna say that because at Oakland we tend to be very like reinforce every bridge, but we do, what I consider to be kind of a sub-form of differential reinforcement, often with just using carrot for low quality, cookie for high quality, 3 cookies for a super high quality. Or we,
You're mixing terms.
because that's magnitude.
It's magnitude and schedule of reinforcement.
So you don't feel like it has the same effect of saying this is quality?
They're used with different purposes.
Okay.
So, so what magnitude of reinforcement is the yummy factor,
Mhm.
right? How much, how big, how delicious it is. The schedule of reinforcement is when you're providing the primary reinforcer in association with the bridge. So every bridge gets a piece of food, hopefully only for correct behavioral responses, is a continuous schedule of reinforcement. And then the variable schedule of reinforcement, of which there are many different types of variable schedules, but kind of what we think about in our practical application of it is providing the food reinforcement on a random basis for correct behavioral responses.
I think an example of what Stacy's talking about is for the zebra to say we're trying to get them to lean their entire body lengthwise in the fence. And they're making progress, but they were getting to that point where it's not exactly what we want. So we want to reward them, but they're not quite there, even though they can get there. We tend to use a variable magnitude, so we'll use a carrots, which is lower value, for you've made some progress, let's go further. And then once they've actually completed the behavior to the degree that we require, is when they get the high value magnitude.
Yeah, so you're using magnitude to communicate, this was good, but this is better.
Right.
I think we just use magnitude as our ability to communicate quality here generally, because I can only speak for our section, but we generally tend to train on a continuous reinforcement schedule all the time, but we're still able to communicate to the animal about quality, and we do it through magnitude
Right.
rather than through schedule. I think that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, and but that's still different than selective reinforcement. So you
Right.
are still selecting to reinforce with a higher value reinforcer, the big move in. You're not reinforcing with as much at the halfway move in.
Right.
So you're still using selective reinforcement. You're
Okay.
using it very purposefully and in fact beautifully combining it with magnitude.
Okay, so it's
Does that
selective.
make sense to
Yeah.
everybody?
Yeah.
Because that is an important.
They're not mutually exclusive, they can be
Correct.
combined. You can
Okay.
selectively reinforce with the higher magnitude for those higher quality behaviors.
Yes, yes. That if you're higher, if you're using magnitude for X, Y, and Z, then that's where you're failing on the selective reinforcement, because now you're making everything the same.
Thank you.
No, great point.
It's that mutually exclusive thing that I think people get caught up on. It's like, but you're not getting a higher quality. It's like, yeah, but they're getting a little snack.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus-
And depending on, I mean, and that's where, you know your animals, the individuals, the species, depending on the individual, you may need to provide those little tidbits to keep them motivated and going. Whereas some others might get distracted by it and think, oh, that was good enough.
The zebras will definitely do that. If they've already walked like almost completely in and then they're like, really, still nothing? They're like, I tried, let me try something else now because what I was doing was wrong.
Yeah.
So like continuing to tell them you're on the right track is important to the zebras.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we just have to be careful when we think about how we use magnitude, because I think just in that same, food is love continuum, I think they can do a really good job of training us, to where, today they'll take a carrot as a, good job, but keep going. And then maybe tomorrow they're like, nah, I don't eat carrots. You better have something else. And I know, I've worked with a number of animals where they have gotten to the point of, in their training of me, where they are increasing the magnitude to where, you're at the point of, all right, what's it gonna be next? A pot pie?
I think we do a really good job though, phasing out our higher reward items and going back down to carrots once it is a learned behavior. Once they've got it down, we kind of phase
Yeah.
out all the cookies.
And I think that's really the important thing, is that you're really being conscientious about when you're using that higher magnitude, so that it doesn't become something that is, part of your routine of every time they do that move in, that's
It's
now,
like 10 cookies.
a solid behavior they're getting, so that's exactly the way to do it. But I think it's something that you always have to kind of remind yourself of, otherwise you can fall into that slippery slope of.
Now they only work for pot pies every day.
Yeah, giraffe one.
There's a reason why the elephants are all chunky.
I want to go be an elephant now.
Okay, so here's just some shaping step examples, and I think a lot of you have maybe who's written a shaping plan in here? Who's not? It looks like almost everybody. Okay, all right, good, good. And if you've only written a couple of them, use the resources that are available and read through the shaping plans that are on the Z Drive, and as the training committee makes even more of those sorts of things available, share with each other. It's great to read through other people's and kind of get some ideas. So this is attempting to use the target for foot. You can quickly see the problems. So now we've added in a second target. You see the yellow ball up top to help keep the naughty monkey hands busy. There's a bit of capturing. Oops, not using the ball in that one, sorry. Here's the ball.
What?
You get everything. Hands and feet. Okay, maybe at first, nice move towards the target there. At first she reinforced the hands, the feet, everything on the stick. But then you see the second one was just the foot. And then as you begin to refine the behavior, you're not going to reinforce hands and feet. And starting to desensitize him to moving his foot, having it touched. Another way of, another foot, this is with the pain to be in the lab. So right now, he does not know to move towards the foot target, so just introducing this foot target and using the PVC to keep his hands busy so he's not grabbing the body target. All right, and sometimes you can use the target, whoops. Sometimes you can use the target to help refine the behavior a little bit. In this case, two precious feet coming out. So let's just watch one more time. All right, the behavior is present the left foot. Oops. But that's more than just the left foot, even though it's real cute. Okay? So what we're going to do is use the hand target to shift the baboon's weight so that it's easier for her to present the one foot. There it is. Feet. Okay, and then Ashley has been, let me just stop for a second. Ashley had been working just on that left foot, but after the response that we saw, I mean, clearly she understands, she the baboon, is it Mimi?
It's Cody.
Cody. Cody understands the foot cue, just doesn't have it refined enough to be able to say foot or foot. So she decided to narrow it down and just work on the left foot and try to get that and then go back to the right foot. So you saw the left foot presented perfectly there, and I said, go ahead and try the other one. Let's just see what happens. And this is what happened. So again, use the target, shift your weight to one side, 2 feet, try again. Perfect. So when I say targets aren't the be-all, end-all, you use the target to help set the animal up for success in a sense. In this case, we need to shift the weight, and actually we did this with bears. Was that yesterday or today? Yesterday. We did this with the bears as well, is shift their body position, shift their weight so that it's easier to bring one foot up. And then you can do the same thing to bring the other foot up. So again, the target is simply a tool that allows you to position the animal in such a way. In this case, she had been trying to train a shoulder present. So we use the hand target to take the super long arm across the animal's body, therefore exposing the shoulder to be able to body target the shoulder. So take the hand over, body target the shoulder. And I realize it's getting close to time. Oh, Eugene.
Should we save some of this for Thursday?
I don't know, I just tried to pick some behaviors that I had videos documenting the steps involved in training, so we can save that for Thursday, or I can kind of skip over that if it's not of interest, doesn't matter to me. Y'all.
I would save it for Thursday because I think it's interesting. We
Okay.
are out of time.
Yeah, I know we're out of time, so, okay, well then we'll stop there and we'll pick this one up again on Thursday.